Okay, hi everyone.
Right.
Welcome to the last panel discussion of this year's first Digital Liverpool Arab Arts Festival. I'm confident most of you are familiar with LAF's work and history. But in case there are some newcomers tonight, first, a special welcome. LAF is the largest annual celebration of Arab arts and culture in the UK. It's also the oldest. This is our 22nd festival, with 17 acts and well over 50 artists. What's most impressive, at least to me, is that while most arts festivals are founded by arts administrators and artists, all of this grew from a weekend project created by the Liverpool Arab community. And we're very proud of those ties, but also we maintain them very closely. All 50 of the events were and are free. You can still watch the film programs through Saturday evening. And tomorrow is our closing party with Dara Tribes at 7 p.m. back after last year's big success at the Palm House, play a set for us, preceded by DJ Jacques Machance doing a set starting at 6. Artists' Ideas Now has been curated in collaboration with Creative Destruction, an initiative to connect arts, activism, and politics by building unique spaces where complex, radical, and new conversations can happen. And it's been a joy to work on this project with Creative Destruction's founder, Zoe Lafferty, who is also a member of LAF's board, which makes us very lucky. The theme of tonight's discussion, conflict, colonialism, and the climate crisis. We believe these issues are profoundly intertwined, even if it isn't always easy to see. Some of tonight's speakers will focus more on one of these terms than another, and I'm certain our discussions will make lots of connections among them. Some brief operating procedures, which are a tiny change from the previous two sessions. Each speaker will talk for 5 minutes, and then we'll go directly into Q&A. As previously, please do not ask questions until the speakers have finished speaking, or we run a real risk of losing track of your question. So if you think you're likely to want to participate, make sure you have somewhere to take notes. We do, however, want to encourage you to use the chat, for example, to signal your agreement with a point, pluses or thumbs up icons or whatever, and also by dropping appropriate links in there, which Zoe will do as well. And of course, it should go without saying, but please refrain from any personal attacks, inappropriate language, or divisive comments. LAF works hard to create positive conversations everywhere we go and everything we do. We're very lucky to have Lauren Lister as our signer this evening. So if you have a question and you need signing support, please note that on your question and you will have priority. Most people are unaware of how draining signing can be. So signers do not work for more than an hour, and we won't expect Lauren to exceed that. She'll leave on the dot at 7. So as I said, if you need sign support, please let us know along with your question. If you're enjoying this or any of our free digital events throughout the festival, please consider donating to LAF. 2020 has been unkind to all of us, but especially to artists. And 100% of the money raised from your donations will go towards commissioning artists for our 2021 festival. Help us help artists from across the MENA region and its diasporas recover from the challenges of 2020. Please give generously. There's a link on our website, arabartsfestival.com, and on our social media. Led by some of the most exciting artists of MENA heritage from the region and across the globe, this series aims to address the pressing and complex conversations of this moment and the action we can take moving forward. So let's jump right in. Tonight's first speaker is Faisal Abu Al-Haija, who is an actor and comedian born in the Jenin refugee camp in Palestine. He graduated as part of the inaugural class of students from the Freedom Theater in Jenin's acting school, founded by Giuliano Merchamis. He has performed throughout Palestine as well as in Brazil, India, the UK, the US, and across Europe with the Freedom Theatre as a member of Red Noses International and on tour in the UK with celebrated British comedian Mark Thomas. I could go on and on. I'll just mention Faisal is currently the director of the Janine Comedy Club at the Freedom Theatre, where he leads improv comedy trainings for students from across Palestine. Faisal, to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. It's really, I'm honored to be on this panel, especially with three interesting, inspiring ladies. And I'm the only man on the panel. So that's, it's first time happen. That's kind of put me in a, you know, in different state of mind. I'm Faisal. I work for the Freedom Theatre, like under the vision of culture resistant. When we say culture resistant, we mean using art and culture as a tool of resistance against the occupation. One of my interesting projects where I'm focusing on is a project called the Freedom Bus. Freedom Bus, it's a bus that tour West Bank with artists, activists, audience to do performances like playback theater performances, to do shows. And we visit in this bus, basically, we focus on Area C, because Area C, it's one of the areas where it's surrounded by Israeli settlements, a lot of checkpoints, and the communities there and the people there have special circumstances about what's going on, like they're struggling with basic of life. I talk about places like Jordan Valley and places like South Hebron Hills. And we as an artist who believe in culture, we find the playback theater as an introduction for the community there, to bring theater to this community and to bring more awareness and to try to raise the stories up. One of the challenges here in Palestine sometimes, because people facing so many challenges in their life, occupation, life, community, religion, so many things. So people got used to this thing, and it's become less important to share a story. So by using playback theater or any kind of art we believe in that increase people to tell who they are and what they want to be. And this is mainly the idea of the Freedom Bus that I'm working on in the Freedom Bus. Unfortunately, this year we couldn't do it because of coronavirus. Usually we do it in March and April because the weather, it's the best weather in Palestine, like it's a springtime. So yeah, do I still have time or I run over 5 minutes? I go, oh, thank you. So yeah, and beside that, I believe in comedy so much. I do a lot of comedy around Palestine, because what I learn, like when we want to focus on something, like we hear this sentence a lot, we want to raise awareness, we want to bring the media to some causes. But because it's become, we are living in digital world, where is a lot of information, where is a lot of stories going on, sometimes true, sometimes it's not. So people become less interested about, or media become less interested about what is true. Everybody want to be first. So one of the things that I use, which is comedy, I believe it's a tool to bring awareness for any cause in very different shape of art, which is stayed with people's hearts and also make people laugh. And to come back to Area C, like, you know, when we go there first time to Jordan Valley example, like everybody was like against like what theater should do to us, how theater can bring water to me, whereas the Israelis taking the water and didn't allow us to open a road for our farms. And this community, basically, they are Bedouin, like, so they need to move, they need a special kind of land, depend the time. And it was really challenging. I don't know what to say, how theater can do that. I said theater will not bring it, but at least we educate the people about what you're facing here, because nobody knows what's going on here. And after the first show, you know, like people, they were hesitating to share stories, to tell us what they're facing every day. But after a couple of shows, then people start to have a competition who will tell the best story for us to do it. And this has made me think a lot about what is art can do. Really, this is a question I've been asking myself almost every day. And really, I don't have an answer what art can do, but from this working in Area C and with these communities, it's kind of encouraging people, empowering them. I don't know if it's fair to say that, or also bringing like a different language where everybody understands it. Sometimes we feel we are less understood when we speak. So we speak less because we have no hope for change, especially in Jordan Valley and South Hebron Hills. And there is more stories I would love to share with you, like about this experience, but I will try to stay with the time as much as I can. So thank you very much for now. And really, I do appreciate this invitation very much. I'm looking forward to hear a question so I will pass the mic to you, Anahi. Thank you.
It was pretty much perfectly 5 minutes, just so you know. Okay, our next speaker is Sama Hijawi, an artist and researcher in Brussels, currently doing her PhD in art practice. In her multimedia works, she explores the aesthetics of representation in artworks that allude to the histories of Palestine. Her works have been shown in museums and galleries in Brussels, London, Maastricht, New York, and Amman, among others. He was previously one of the directors of Makan Art Space, which lasted from 2003 to 2016, an independent space for contemporary art in Amman. She co-curated the platform The River Has Two Banks, which addressed the growing distance between Jordan and Palestine.
Thank you very much. That was a great introduction and actually a brilliant segue into, I'll talk a little bit about my work and also try and refer in some way to the theme that we have on the table today. So yeah, indeed, I've been working both as an artist and a curator for quite a number of years, and I've recently, well, not so recent anymore, I've been in Belgium for about 6 or 7 years, which in fact gave me a very different understanding of coloniality. It's one thing to be living in the Arab world, Palestine or Jordan, it's quite close, and also to produce work in reference and in response to that from within. Because also collectively, I think the artists and the communities, as Faisal just mentioned, are constantly trying to respond to very immediate things, questioning how to engage the community, but also how to offer them something also, so that, you know, because just to consume culture sometimes is a bit difficult depending on who your audience are and who it is that you're working with. So bless Belgium has a really long colonialist history to reflect on. So it really opened up actually my perspective on something extremely important, which is to position myself amongst the larger colonized and racialized people. And this has been very humbling, because then there's a lot to learn from, but then you also feel like you're not alone, especially as a Palestinian, where sometimes, and particularly because of the way things have been changing in the Arab world in the last 5 years, there's a sense of isolation throughout the whole region. So I've been working a lot with the theme of trying to understand how the occupation and colonization of Palestine is represented in art. But I would like to use that last in the biography that Anahen just outlined, of a a project that sort of links a little bit straight back into the theme of how colonization and conflicts and did you call it climate crisis? Yeah, climate crisis. So indeed, I did launch a project with a curatorial collective that addresses both sides of the Jordan River bank. But then I actually, for a project that was presented in Palestine, in Ramallah, I did a meditation on, you know, there's always this thing of like, what is the solution to this problem? What are we going to do with the occupation? What are we going to do with Palestine? What are we going to do? And indeed, maybe the climate could bring about my proposition that I made at the time, which was really confusing for most of the audiences, because the project was called, what was the project called? The Other Side, I think. It was like a project in different parts, but basically the main proposition that I did, which was published in a book by the Qattan Foundation for the cities exhibition, was I proposed that we get an earthquake along the fault lines, which is basically in the Dead Sea, the Jordan Valley and the Dead Sea area. So this area basically geographically lies on a fault line that separates Asia from Africa. And indeed, actually, Palestine is on the tectonic plate that's going south, and I think Jordan's on the tectonic plates that's going north. So I was like, this would be super great, because if we get the earthquake that they've been waiting for like 100 years, it's going to come right smack in the middle into the Jordan Valley. And indeed, what I was hoping would happen was the entire Palestine would just completely slip, all of it, historical Palestine. And then I thought, you know what, while we're at it, we should also like, maybe Lebanon can also go, because we don't know what to do with that mess. So my proposition was, what if the whole thing sank and it was gone? So I should have prepared the postcard. No, I don't have it here. So and then as a sort of a reflection on that, I produced a small postcard called Jerusalem Dives, where I would set up a snorkeling company and a deep sea diving company where we could go and see just, you know, like it would be a site. So Jerusalem was underwater with a bunch of fish. I'll try and fish it out maybe a bit later. So indeed, maybe the climate crisis with everything that's happening here, maybe the earth would get really upset and just, you know, shake it about a little bit, and we would get an earthquake. But basically my proposition, although I tend to use these kind of strange, humorous, I don't know, Faisal's frowning. Do you think this is funny? Not so funny, huh?
It's so funny. You can't see, come on, you can't see me giggling. It's funny.
Okay, good. All right. So it was also like it was also a bit of trying to ask people to contemplate what would our life be without this? Because really we are unable to, like sometimes I feel trapped, unable to move, to think, to play, to be relaxed, to explore other things, because there's such an enormous duty and there's a lot of work to be done both within the community and outside of it. So I'm not sure if people got my sense of humor, and we tried to take this into a discussion, of course, and they were a bit weirded out. So, and I reproduced the same enormous collage for like a 7-meter wall piece, basically of Jerusalem underwater with like little fish and snorkelers, that was presented in the Qattan Foundation in Palestine and also here in Brussels. So yeah, so that was one of the works that really, I think, responded very directly in maybe I'm a bit fed up with the whole thing, or I don't know what to do. So maybe I was in a moment of crisis, I don't know. So yeah. So I'll leave it at that. So I'm sure we're going to have a conversation on it, but this is just sort of one of the one of the works that stand out. Is not particularly like, it's one of the It was one of the fun works that I did and reproduced in several forms over the years, in thinking about the representation of Palestine in art. So I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Sama. That was great. I thought it was very funny, I have to say. Okay, our next speaker is Sabrina Mahfouz. Sabrina has recently been elected Fellow of the Royal Society of Literature. She has won a Sky Arts Academy Award for Poetry, a Westminster Prize for New Playwrights, and a Fringe First Award for her play Chef. Her play, With a Little Bit of Luck, won the 2019 Best Drama Production at the BBC Radio and Music Awards. She also writes for children, and her play Zarafa Giraffa won the 2018 Off West End Award. Just last year, her play History of Water in the Middle East had a 5-week run at the Royal Court Theatre, and as one review said, it, quote, expresses the anger and sadness arising from centuries of imposed rule and oppression, close quote. So, Sabrina, thank you.
Thank you. So nice to be here. And yeah, I'm gonna just read an extract actually from that play, A History of Water in the Middle East. It'll be a little bit of a tone shift because it is not funny. There were funny bits in the play, but this bit is not funny. So trigger warning, by the way, sexual assault and just general depressing stuff. But I guess for me, like that profoundly intertwined triangle of conflict, colonialism and climate crisis that we were introduced to at the beginning of this talk. At this point of time right now, I can't really think of it anywhere more apparent than Yemen, that all of those things are sort of really, really at the forefront in a way that is just constantly sidelined and ignored, despite, in the UK anyway, I'm not sure about other places, despite the UK's very large involvement in that, both historically and right now. So I'll just read the extract. Please excuse, it's just me. Usually there would be 3 performers and also Kareem Samara, an amazing musician, helping this to all flow. So you'll just have me, but hopefully you'll get the gist. Anyway, Yemen. In 2019, the UN declares it as suffering the worst man-made humanitarian crisis in all of history. 22 million require aid. 100,000 children under 5 have died of starvation. Lines drawn by greed, impatience and ego on who needs to go home early to say sorry for their infidelity. So can we just draw the line? Can we just get on with it? Because there's not much to it, is there? There's not much more that we're doing here than just drawing a line in the God-forsaken sand, is there? This is where they lead. Lockheed Martin, British American arms manufacturer, makes a bomb that in 2018 killed 40 Yemeni boys on a bus coming back from school. 180 years ago, in 1839, British forces forcibly occupied Aden at the tip of what is now Yemen in order to launch attacks on the pirates attacking British ships bound to and from India. It became convenient for refueling, and after the Suez Canal opening, it became one of the most important ports in all the world. To the British, of course, an importance based on water, empire, untouchable power, an importance that took away any independence, any consequence of concentrating all resources to a port before you leave and then. By 2020, Sana'a, the capital of Yemen, was set to become the first place in the world, followed shortly after by the entire country, to officially, completely run out of fresh water. Yemen had lush arable areas, even as a water-scarce nation before this current war, but Saudi and UAE and USA and UK and Yemen and Russia and Qatar and Sudan and Morocco and Kuwait and Iraq and Senegal and Jordan and Bahrain and Hezbollah and Al-Qaeda and Iraq and whoever else is involved in attacks, in part due to access over that old friend of ours, the Suez Canal, have chosen water as the weapon for slow murder. The pipes bomb them. Desalination tanks smash that. Set fire to supply infrastructure, watch them choke of smoke mixed with cholera, twist their organs with thirst. Water poor does not mean it has all been spent, but that the wealth has been taken away. Yemen, not allowed a shred of the wetness you're famous for. Some researchers predict that 98% of Yemeni women have been sexually assaulted during this 4-year drawn-out conflict. Where will they wash themselves? Will they scrub with sand grains until they regain the glass hours they've lost to lines and legs drawn by lords made into marble statues soaked with rain and engraved with their grands' names for all of time, whilst these women, born to the same earth but emerging from its middle, means they can't even give graves to their children, let alone engrave them. They can't rid their skin of intrusion, invasion, intervention, all the same old war, and no amount of water can wash it away. This is an old, old war. This is an old, old war. To blame us for the droughts, blame us for the thunder, blame us for the waves taking us all under. Burn us for your palace, burn us for your crown, burn us for our bodies, taking us all down. This is an old, old war. We carry history on our shoulders. We carry history in our hearts. We've carried ourselves over mountains to end up drowning in the sand. This is an old, old war. Thanks.
Sorry, I thought I had unmuted. That was wonderful. Thank you. Okay. And our last speaker, I'm sorry that we're moving quickly, but that will mean we have time for Q&A. So our last speaker is Doreen Tutikian, who is a cultural producer and entrepreneur with a background in human-centered design. She is founder and former executive director of Beirut Design Week, founder and president of MENA Design Research Center, and co-founder of Loop. Her consultancy work focuses on human-centered design with nonprofit organizations such as UNRWA for Palestine refugee camps development in Lebanon and IOM for creative and cultural industries development in Kurdistan. She believes multidisciplinary collaboration and community building is essential to the success of all cultural projects. Doreen.
Thank you, Anahid. Thank you also, Sabrina. That was very powerful. And it just really kind of shook me there for a second because I was like on this certain trail and then it was kind of all broken. So I'm getting back in there now. I wanted to focus a bit more on the climate crisis aspect of this panel, especially since it's something that I've been quite involved with in Lebanon, with the festival for many years, and also because I come from a design background and I've worked with so many designers and architects within Lebanon. I think in our context, the most evident experience that we've had is when we had the 2015 trash crisis in Lebanon that made global headlines everywhere. And when we were down protesting within the You Stink movement, it was actually the first time that the country came together on an environmental issue. I mean, we were used to protesting for everything else, which is wrong with the country, but it was the first time that this became a priority for the people. And I think that it was a very important step for us. And so myself and my team decided to dedicate the whole Design Week festival to sustainability. So to look out for different projects that are going on, whether they're from architects or artists or activists, to see what's going on and just to show that to the people. In a kind of very sarcastic way, while we were working on this festival, we had an office in this area called Daura, which is next to Burj Hamoud, if any of you have ever been to Beirut. And it was right across a huge landfill, which was right at the sea. And it was called, it's Makab Burj Hamoud, so it's the landfill of Burj Hamoud. And while we were working on this, there was a kind of secret underground sort of governmental project to basically get rid of that landfill and turn it into land and slowly make it go into the sea. And while we were talking about this, we watched how that actually happened in front of our eyes, and we felt absolutely very helpless. And at the same time, what we witnessed for a very long time is that even though we thought that we were the youth that was protesting against something that was good for the country, good for the environment and nature, somehow the government thought that they had the right to arrest and to beat people for that. And that was the first time that I realized that actually, you know, the government is kind of against you. Fast forward to 2019, the wildfires broke out in October 13th, and a week later was the beginning of the long-awaited Lebanese revolution, which is still going on right now, even though the whole country is experiencing a very major collapse that I'm sure many of you heard about already. When I was asked to speak on this panel, I just thought it was quite funny, coincidence maybe, that colonialism, conflict, and climate crisis could be like the subtitle for a book about Lebanon, because they come together so perfectly. It's a trifecta that we've been dealing with for so long. And it's such an obvious link to the country, because if we think about it, it's the colonial powers that actually divided us into the sectarian political system, so that we can never manage anything collectively, ever. And this has been the foundation of all of our problems. So environmental issues need collective, collaborative, systemic change to be tackled. But still we find the politicians arguing which neighborhood will have which landfill, causing cancer to the people that are living there. And it becomes a lot more about protecting yourself and your own clan against others at the cost of others. And over the years, I mean, I've seen so many really brilliant initiatives going on in Lebanon, from activists, designers, architects, artists. And I think that by now that there's a huge awareness in this with the country. But we also know that, you know, recycling and composting and making or buying sustainable goods and products won't really solve the bigger issue. We know that this needs systemic change for things to change. This needs political power. This needs real democracy. But nonetheless, it is something that I've always found very important for our self-care, for our mental well-being, and for our creative development, because it's an expression of us and what we believe should be the truth, even though it is not really achievable right now. And I'm going to keep this really short. I mean, I know that this is really broad, but just one thing that I'd like to point out about the terminology of climate crisis. I think that within the Middle East and in our Arab countries, we perceive the climate crisis as the crisis of the developed world. It's not ours. We feel that when we're talking about the environment, we use terms like pollution, types of pollution, and we use terminologies like a government or political corruption that is not helping us build the infrastructure to do this. It's still so much, you know, in our own little bubble that we're trying to sort out the most basic things. Climate crisis feels so much bigger than us. When we're not being able to take care of basic things like taking care of our garbage or having access to clean water or electricity or public transport or having any public green space. And I think it's kind of fair that people in this region don't really focus so much or are incapable of seeing this global problem because actually, you know, there's still so much that needs to be dealt with to actually reach the most basic human rights first. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
That was great, Doreen, thank you. We're going to open up to questions now. I just want to read to the panelists some of the notes that have been coming up in the chat, just so you know. There's been lots of like great talk, blah, 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 that kind of stuff. So beautiful, thank you. But unusually, there's been a comment to Lauren. It's that Angela Martin says, beautiful interpreting, Lauren, which is lovely. So, okay. Yes, and Magdalena Schamberger said, wow, that was amazing, Sabrina. So there's a number of comments like that. The first question is, how can oppressed voices be elevated by the arts? Wide open to all of you.
Could you please repeat the question again? Sorry, I didn't hear it.
Sure, no, it's okay. How can oppressed voices be elevated by the arts? It's sort of what all of you do.
Regarding to this question, I don't know, just like there's a story come to my mind. I don't know if it's answer this or not. Like one of the community we work with during the Freedom Bus. It's a village called Twani, which took place in South Hebron Hills. And then, you know, for a playback theater, we hear stories, and then actors will retransfer this story to piece of theater or art by improvisation immediately.
You're muted.
Yeah. Do you hear me first, like about what I
It's
said
perfect.
first? Thank you. So the story I'm going to share, it's about attire. So in this small community in South Hebron Hills, they decide to have a summer camp during the school vacation for the children there. So, and this, when we say Tuwani and South Hebron Hills, we talk about a village in top of a mountain and surrounded by Israeli settlement all the way, and also checkpoints, and also some areas it's for military training. Like that's one of the excuses the Israeli army do to take the land. Like they will say it's a military training area. So they pick one of these mountain, beautiful one, which is like no settlement there, and to have the summer camp there. And one of their plan was to bring a lot of tires, like hundreds of black tires, and paint them with the Palestinian flag, which is red, white, blue. Like it's become something very, very colorful. In the same time, this mountain is in front of the settlement mountain. So was around in this camp, like you talk about 38 child between like 8 years to 14 years old. And you know, tomorrow they will start the summer camp. So after they finish the work, like one of the settlers came out of the settlement and he steal one of these tires. He took it away with him. So the children saw that. It's spontaneously like reaction without anybody ask them anything. Suddenly they organize a demonstration. Like they march together to the settlement, which is called Hafat Ma'on. They march with one voice. We want the tire. We want the tire. So the villages are their families. They hear the sound. So they thought, oh my God, there's some maybe attack it's happening there or something. So they came running behind them. And you know, they just hear, we want the tire. So all the villages start to say, we want the tire. And then it's become a huge like demonstration for a tire. And of course, you know, if you got too close to any settlement here in Palestine, suddenly, you know, all the electric fans will work, all the cameras, all the police, all the bodyguard, dogs, like everything, like it's kind of a Hollywood movie. And then they start to, you know, to stop the people. And what you want? What's going on? We want the tire. And the army keep insisting there is no tire. And the funny part of the story, it's like, the children know the guy who took it. Like when they know it because he's the most like fat man in this settlement. They know these people very well. So they change the chanting from we want the tire to the fat man took it, the fat man took it, the fat man took it. After a long day of demonstration, they took the tire back, but it's different one. It's not the one with painting. Like it's not the one. It's just like randomly one. The children insist, like they don't want it. They want the tire that's being taken from them. And you know, to stand in front of a settlement, it's still like to have this power to stand there with this security surrounded is so much like powerful to me and inspiring. And when I ask the children, like I interview them, like to make a play about this story specifically, like what's your motivation, like why you are not afraid like of guns, of dogs, of bombs? He said like this, like today is the tire, tomorrow is the mountain. So they become that expert somehow of finding their way of resistance. And this is like for me, what art can do, you know, regarding to the question. And we did the play about this story, about the tire. It was a street show. It was really super strong for me to see that in every place we perform, you know, we end the show with the audience chanting, "We want the tire, we want the tire." So in all West Bank, we had a tour. I will call it like that. That was 2014. That was like kind of a, I would love to call it a tire tour. And this like one of the example where sometimes we have a story that I don't know what. So in every place we perform, everybody like come to me and suggested a story. He wanted from us to do it as a play. Like, I have a story, it's the same, better than the tire. And then I have this. So we become like, you create, that is the language of culture resistance we work for. And I hope that story covered the question about how is the, actually I forget the question, to be honest with you. I fly with the story.
It's okay. The person who asked the question said, "Thank you. The story is beautiful." So you answered the question. But I think also, I mean, one answer to the question about how can art help oppressed voices is just to look at the panel and maybe the whole festival, right? People create art from where they are. And so when artists are in places or in identities that are oppressed, they tell those stories. That changes the world. It may be very slow. It may be incremental. It may be frustrating. There's no doubt it makes change, at least to me anyway. Let's see, what up? There's more questions. Okay, this is from an anonymous attendee. What are your thoughts on systems of oppression that succeed in silencing voices through fear? Fear of prosecution, of forced disappearance, threats to family, or worse? Small question.
That's a difficult one. Yeah. Yeah, it also says about the precarity, right, of certain situations. I don't think that everybody lives in the same condition, whereas perhaps you have a certain amount of, you know, leeway to criticize, or freedom, if you like, to critique, although I'm not sure where there are real freedoms anywhere in the world today, because we're all really being watched, and that's also quite frightening. But for sure, if you're in Europe, you can criticize, at least, you know, I can criticize, you know, the Jordanian or the Palestinian government from here much more freely than I could if I was there, because I'm not so reachable here, well, to a certain degree. I think people do have to be careful also. They have to choose, they have to be seriously conscious and aware of the choices that they make sure that they also have a support mechanism to be able to pull them out. Because when people go, when something happens to somebody, it's not just about you being taken away or disappearing. You have an entire family that, you know, that will find it super difficult to continue, even if, you know, in Palestine especially, and everybody agrees we all need to resist, but the pain, I mean, there's an accumulation of pain and loss. So I find that also, it's a very difficult question to answer. Like, what are the limits? What are, I guess, your personal limits? How far are you willing to go?
I think, sorry.
Yeah, that's a kind of, at the moment in Egypt, I think, as far as the known statistics are known, I think it has, relatively speaking, the most amount of writers in prison out of the whole world. And yeah, I just constantly get emails from various people that I know that this writer is now in prison, and it's really it's awful. And what's even more awful is when they write those emails, they write separate ones to the Arabs and separate to the non-Arabs, because they say, we're writing this to you to let you know, but we don't expect you to put your name on this, because even by having your name on this letter of support or this petition, you're putting yourself in a particular position of risk if you come here, and it makes it really hard, and it makes you feel like you can't freely go to the country that you are from if you're already living and working outside of that country. Obviously, if you are in that country, the risks are much greater, and even having that fear of return is a luxury compared to that. But it's still something that affects you in a way that I feel a lot of people, even though, like you say, there's definitely nowhere that's completely free, it is a feeling that a lot of people from a lot of countries don't feel, that, you know, they can say whatever about their country wherever they are, and they'll go back there and it will be relatively okay. So yeah, I don't think that answers the question, but just to say that, yeah, the fear is real and shared by thousands and thousands of artists around the world.
Corinne, I see you. Just let me say one thing and then I'll turn to you. On Wednesday in the panel, Santosh Sabayek was talking about Egypt. And she said that now they're arresting even girls making TikTok videos. So Zoe, if you have that petition link, maybe you could post it. She shared a petition with us after the event. Because there's, I mean, now arresting young girls on TikTok. That's how bad the censorship has gotten in Egypt. So yeah, I think one answer to the question is it's very different depending on where you are, right? Each context is very, very specific, and you have to be knowledgeable about it before you wade into it. And that's one of the things that people in the West do wrong all the time. They wade in without knowing what's going on, and they create problems for people that they don't even understand. They are not subject to them. Green, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that we definitely know that systems of oppression are on the rise all over the world. We definitely know that there's a lot happening even to people that we never thought could be affected by the system. I mean, I'm sure you know, for example, in Erdogan's politics, how many people have been imprisoned also. So these last few days, I've been discussing this a lot with friends who have been completely depleted from protesting in Lebanon and realizing that there is no more hope. Self-care is a form of resilience also, that we should always take that into consideration. There is no point in us completely falling apart and bringing everyone else down around us for this cause if we can't actually continue with it with a peaceful mind. So
that's a really good point. That's a very good point. I think this is also not something that we are educated to do, you know. We're a bit like this selflessness that drives you straight into the wall, and yeah, and it's sometimes the system is much bigger than us also.
Indeed.
But
Indeed. If you are not looking at the chat, those of you who haven't had a look, there's loads of links both to the artist's work and to the petition I just mentioned and all kinds of stuff. So there's lots of resources there for you to look at. Let's get back to, okay, there's a couple of questions. One from Rana. I would love to hear the panelists' thoughts on the Syria crisis and how the climate crisis has been at the center of this, along with other issues related to colonialism, power, etc.
Well, I just briefly say that during the researching for the show that I did, there is a lot of amazing writing on how the climate crisis affected the Syrian conflict, and one of those being a drought that pushed all of the people who were previously living in the rural areas and farming into the urban areas, and that explosion of population in those places just sort of helped to make the conflict, just enlarged the conflict and pushed things to happen that maybe would have taken a little bit longer had the population not been under such intense pressures. Obviously, there's so many other things that are happening as well, but that the climate is seen as one element of that huge, complex crisis.
That's great.
I would like just to add about this. Like when I saw the title, that climate crisis, I got really stressed about what I should say about it as an artist. And then I realized, as a Palestinian, like I've been living this all my life. Like really, if we talk about lands, like every day there is a story that the land been taken by the Israeli army, especially as I mentioned about Area C. Like from last month, the Israeli army start to bring more tanks to the Jordan Valley, so to take an action to do like the American deal, which is the deal of the century. So they will take all Jordan Valley. And to talk about water, it's the same story. Like the water in West Bank, it's very limited. Like it's very rich area of water, but limited access to us. So even in the Israeli and Palestinian Authority agreement, there is a number of how much liter each Palestinian city will use. And same for like, and you know, our community is like a farmers community, depending on the water so much. So, and then it was so much funny for me. Like sometimes we see a big title that far from us. We think that because of maybe the language, maybe because we didn't think about it. And also because we normalize with this. So we got normalized by the system, which is the occupation system. Like that is okay. That is fine. It's been the water like this all the time. Like for me, when I travel around the world, really, you know, I was lucky in my life. I traveled so much to UK, to all of these places. I always forget that, oh, is that true? Is they have this freedom of moving, of space, of water, of all the action, even like, so still like, so climate crisis is the center of this subject. Like it's connected to everything in our life. Even like just before when we prepare, like it was so funny story. Like for me, like I was worried about like my phone will turn off because of the heat, you know, because the heat getting like stronger and stronger in Palestine. Like today was very hot. So every electric device, it will go off. So I keep checking, like I keep touching the device and all okay, it's not hot enough. So I still can't continue. I have to say this story before I turn it off. I have to tell this before I turn it off. So suddenly I'm in different state of mind as a human, as an artist, about how I want to express myself, and I want to be part of this panel. And thanks. I will stop till here.
Thanks, Faisal. Sama, you wanted to say something, and then I have a pair of questions that I want to pose to both.
I was sort of like trying to reflect, because these questions are quite intense. I kind of get the feeling that it's a bit unfair to pose a climate crisis on this region. I mean, the colonialist system created resource crises, several of them. So of course, as Doreen said, people don't relate to climate crisis as something that they have or should even be concerned about. I mean, I don't, people go out to the climate crisis march here. I'm just like, I can't go. I mean, I feel like it doesn't come from the heart. It doesn't resonate with me because the governments who both produce the climate crisis and decisions around that, as well as occupations and colonizations and wars, etc., are really for me the ones responsible. And the problem is that individuals become Potentially, or it's as if it's being framed that it's my responsibility, that the climate crisis is my responsibility. And I don't feel like the climate crisis is my responsibility. I can participate in like making better choices, la la la. Sure, it takes a bit of education. I'm sure people are not that nonsensical. But to pose climate crisis in Palestine or Lebanon or Yemen or, you know, it's not, I mean, there's, yeah.
I think that's really important, but I think that there is like a global climate crisis which can't be denied, and obviously governments have definitely exacerbated that.
Yeah.
But I think what you're saying is that like none of the colonial powers have in any way admitted, and none of those colonial countries are in any way educated about what they did in those other places that are now experiencing some of climate crisis, but so much worse because of, as you say, the way that they impacted their access to resources and continue to take the resources in the way that they intended to from all those years ago. So I think that's a really good point. For me, climate crisis does still exist in the area, but it's definitely something that cannot be talked about without talking about colonialism. And the two must be spoken about together.
No, that's exactly the reason we wanted to do the panel, because it's not just that they exist alongside each other and the climate crisis is for everyone. In fact, the climate crisis disproportionately lands on post-colonial and neo-colonial areas where people don't have access to resources and don't have control over their own resources. So it's worse. It's worse in the countries that we're talking about than it is here. We have resources that we can put we can marshal to take care of the problem. If you're in a place where you don't control the resources, then the climate crisis is that much worse. And the yeah, okay, I could go on, but you get the point, right?
Yeah.
But this is exactly the conversation that needs to be had. And I was really conscious about how I even said that, because I have been in many circumstances with Europeans who are very self-righteous, who speak so much about the climate and feel so, have all the authority to tell people in other parts of the world that this is how it should be, and you should be getting this kind of windmills, and you should be doing this kind of power, and this is really the rhetoric. I mean,
absolutely.
You have ambassadors coming to all the universities and telling all the students what they're doing wrong, and there has to be a conversation here that is a lot more critical, I think.
That's exactly the reason that we wanted to do this panel. And in fact, I was going to say this at the end, but I might as well say now, this is going to be the theme of next year's whole festival, because we think that the conversation about climate crisis without an interwoven conversation about colonialism and its legacies it's pointless, right? It just doesn't make any sense. And so we really want to sort of insert that version of the question into the conversation in however we can. So I'll say more about that at the end. Let me just say there's a couple of questions that I would like to make sure you hear at least. There's two that I'll put together and you see what you do with them. One anonymous person said, what is the legacy of colonialism by Europeans in the Arab region? What are the impacts felt today, and what work is being done by Europe to acknowledge this?
Oh,
and then,
sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was like, wow, thinking like that is the whole festival next year. But
yeah,
I'm glad.
And so the second question is, oppressed voices being elevated by arts in terms of storytelling through different modes. How can we preserve the artist's sense of safety and ownership over their work? How to make sure that we have a responsibility to not see their work purely through the Western gaze?
Answer the second one.
Yeah.
Because this one really speaks to my heart. There is fundamentally an issue I think is really important here about the responsibility of artists to make sure that they're also not just responding to, like, not having to tell their story. Some forms of artistic practices can, of course, and are there to tell a story. Like the work that Faisal does, for example, is very much, community-based and, has a very specific language. But on sort of like the works that more will be in festivals and circuit within this so-called contemporary art field, I think there, and this is what I'm seeing here in Belgium, is that the divide is repeated, the polarity is recreated, because somehow the artists are put in this position like, okay, so I'm Palestinian and I need to tell this white audience who doesn't know anything but is, doesn't even go on whatever, Wikipedia. I'm supposed to tell them how bad it is, and they're supposed to sit there and go, oh, I'm so sorry for your pain. And that is so dangerous because, okay, let's say for whatever, the biggest danger for me is that we've just recreated the gap. The gap is still there. I am Palestinian and you are British or whatever. And it has done nothing about the space that we're trying to address here, which, I mean, for me is quite fundamental. And it affects the aesthetics and the forms in which artists are working. So I don't know if that kind of answers it, but it really spoke close to my heart.
Yeah, and I think as a counter to that, which I totally agree with that, and I feel like the only answer to that is to just keep programming as much as possible so that you can have the pain, because pain is also important to be told, but you can also have like the joy and the absolute hilarity and all the rest of it. And in terms of education and like the role that the arts can play with that, in the Middle East, it was like absolutely crucial to the British Empire, and it directly ruled 12 countries, and it only officially left Yemen in 1965, and it's still crucial to our economy right now, whether that's Saudi arms deals, whether that's Suez trading, whether that's, like so many things. And I think that, it is like being torn between being like, why don't you know this? I need to tell you this through the art, and also being like, it's not really that interesting to make art about the economy. I don't really want to, but it's kind of like just torn all the time between wanting to do what needs to be done and also do what you really want to do, trying to marry those two things together.
Thanks. Lauren, I am aware that it's time for you to go. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. If people want to stay on and chat some more, and if the artists are willing, we can stay for a little bit more. I don't want to stay too long, but there's still a few hanging questions. What do you think? Shall we stay a little bit? You can say no.
I can do another 5 or 7 minutes, but then I would have to.
Great, that's fine. So Anil has been asking loads of questions, yes, and we can't hear all of them. But one that I thought really you might want to answer is, what freedoms do we have here in the UK to create spontaneous art and elevate those voices?
Oh, Faisal, you worked with Mark Thomas, and he has got a lot of amazing work about how creating spontaneous art in the UK is not as easy as you might think, in that he's been stopped multiple times doing various things on the street, and because of the amount of land that is actually privately owned, to just get moved on like super quick. And I've been even at the South Bank, which is like a large area that you think is public because just everyone's walking by the river, and done poetry projects there, just like on the ground or just around, and within 5 minutes they always get sort of closed down. So I guess there is freedom to do that, but you have to like really research where you're going to do it if you don't want to get stopped. But if you do want to get stopped and that's part of the project, then again, probably choose somewhere that is sort of privately patrolled rather than by the actual police force.
Great advice. Okay, let's close it there. let me remind you all that there's lots of resources in the chat. So before you sign out, if you want to have access to any of them, go and save that. And as I said, there are films and our tribes on Saturday for the closing party. On behalf of us and Creative Destruction and tonight's speakers, I want to thank everyone for coming to this event. This panel in particular was so important to us because, as I said, this is the launching of next year's festival. And next week, there will be a call put out for work to be considered for the festival. It doesn't have to be completed work. So thanks for being here with us at this kind of unofficial launch of next year's festival. In the meantime, no, we can't applaud because we can't see you, but there's lots of thanks coming up in the chat. Everybody's very grateful. And from me, thank you all for being here. We really, really appreciate it. And one last reminder, please do donate if you can, because if you have those resources, then it helps artists, and we'll be able to do more with the next festival. So thanks very much. Thanks to attendees and to artists alike. Thanks.
Thank
you
you.
very much,
Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you. Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you
Bye.
all.
Nice
Bye.
to meet you all. Thank you.
Bye.